It's an absolute honor to sit up here and to ask them a few questions tonight about sort of their journey and how they became entrepreneurs and what this journey was like for them, because I'm sure each of you will agree that it changes you. Do you feel like you're very different people now than you were when you started Greenhouse? Yeah, good. I hope it's changed you for the better. So I'm going to ask a few of you individual questions. Feel free to chime in, and then we'll do some more general questions. So starting off with Tina. Mental health is a pretty sensitive topic, one that people tend to have a lot of opinions about. So what is the worst piece of criticism you've ever gotten from the pass kit, and how did you handle it?
Oh, all right. So my worst piece of criticism ever, it might have been like my worst piece of criticism in my entire life, was right after I had an article in the in the Waterloo Region Record, and then someone wrote an op-ed saying like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? This is like really." It doesn't make sense. When I was in university, what I survived on was coffee grinds and gin. I don't see that in that kid, and just like really, really critical. And they had a point to like personalize mental health care. But first of all, I volunteer for the paper here, and we get a lot of criticism as well. So I think like emotionally, I was able to cope with that. But then I also reread her opinion and thought, what she's targeting is, she thinks that the pass kit is a solution to all mental health problems, and it's root. It's not. It's only there to address the symptoms when someone is not there. So just like a first aid kit, it's not like a solution to the trauma, but it will like get you to the hospital. So I think that pass kit is that role. So I didn't really get too down on myself, but it was very interesting to have an operator.
Yeah, I believe it. And especially like that definitely takes a toll out of your confidence. You definitely feel below your confidence when something like that happens. Thank you. Laura, I'm going to ask you next just because you're sitting right here and, you know, you're awesome. So one of the questions is with promoting healthy masculinity, it's a big topic, but how do we work this into our everyday lives? What can we do to help promote it within our own networks and our own friend groups?
I'd say that's actually the most important piece of what I'm trying to talk about, is that it is that integrating it into daily life that will be the social change. A lot of it has to do with just the things that we say and the ways that we act that you don't realize are perpetuating this sort of idea of rape culture and normalizing sexual violence. There's a lot of people who make jokes, and I'm like, that's not funny. And they're like, oh, you're taking it too seriously. I'm like, no, that's not funny. Because people, they make light of it, and it is normal. It's a normalized part of society, so people don't think critically about it as much as they should. And people don't think about the negative effects that they might have on not only young growing boys, but then the people that those boys interact with when they get older, when people do pressure people to act a certain way, or if someone isn't like following those constraints of what they should look like as a boy. The top two things that people are called is you're acting like a girl or you're being gay, which is like the worst thing to call a guy is gay or a girl. Like that's the worst insult. That says a lot about what we really value as a society. So people need to think critically about the language that they use and the values that drive that language. And because I'm sure a lot of people that have those reactions initially, they don't realize that what they're really saying by the things that they're saying. So to take a critical look at the way that you talk and the way that people talk around you, and be comfortable speaking up and saying, you know what, that's not funny, or I don't think that you should be saying that, or it's the biggest thing I would say for changing perspectives around this would be for guys to join the conversation.
Right, and that's I kind of had a second question here, so I'm going to ask it. what challenge did you face as a woman, being someone who's trying to start a conversation about healthy masculinity? What were the challenges there? As being a woman in entrepreneurship is one thing, as many of us know in Greenhouse, but tackling this conversation is particularly difficult. So how would you go about that?
I could write a novel.
That will be the second venture.
Starting off, I received a little bit better of a response than I was expecting, because I came at it from a more empathetic point of view. There are a lot of sort of consent-based education things that are very critical, like outwardly critical towards guys, saying like, don't be that guy, don't do that. And that really alienates guys. It makes them feel like you're already blaming them for something that they didn't do, and that really discourages people from getting involved in the conversation. So coming about it from, how does the patriarchy negatively impact your life? People are more open to that discussion. But guys don't like listening to girls, and that's just that's something that I learned that it's disheartening, but it's also understandable, because if a guy came up to me and said, let's talk about the struggles that you faced as being a young girl, I'd be like, no. But the reason why I'm getting involved in this at all is because there aren't guys getting involved in it. There are guys who are, they are very against the idea of rape culture. Of course they think sexual assault is a bad thing, but they won't say anything about it. And so it keeps going on. So even though the majority of guys aren't violent, the majority of guys still don't say anything about it. So that's why I'm here.
Good job, Laura. We need more people like you. I'm going to pass it on to Ashwin. Ashwin, Children's 10 is an organization that's highly reliant on volunteers taking time out of their day to do this, and in a time-poor society. How do you meaningfully keep volunteers engaged and actively recruit new volunteers?
Yeah, so that is definitely a tough call. Yeah. And I think when we're trying to when we're looking to expand Children's 10 to a couple other schools across the region in the GTA. First, we kind of approach it from more of a partnership perspective, so don't put the onus too much on them, and just show them the value that we bring. And then kind of believe, my personal hypothesis, I guess, and I still have yet to test it properly at other schools, but the cause is worthy enough, and there are a lot of people that are very passionate about the cause, just like I was, and there are a lot of guys and girls that are very enthusiastic about helping out back home. So I think you just put out the call to action, put out the call for volunteers. Any younger kids in the audience who want to get involved with Children's 10, let me know. And the guys who are really enthusiastic will definitely come back to you.
I'm going to pass it on to Zied. Zied, you are part of Velocity Science and St. Paul's Greenhouse. We're not going to ask you which one you like better, but we are going to ask you mood lighting for this question. What can you learn and gain from different incubators, and how can we improve the experience for student entrepreneurs in incubators?
So one of the really cool things that happens when you're part of two different incubators, that you get to access two different ecosystems, right? So Velocity, you're really focused on technology. I remember when I started off in Velocity, then I came to Greenhouse. We just focused on technology, and we cared a lot about the patient, but we just really didn't, the user but we just really didn't understand them. So when we came to Greenhouse, it opened up so many doors for us. We got to talk to people, everybody, we talked to the CEO of the local health integration network to patients. We were able to understand the problem and dig into it. And then when you bring Velocity into it, we can figure out solutions that would work, and they'd integrate properly and build a system that actually makes sense. So I think that was one of the coolest things that happens when you bring in these ecosystems. And then you got Conrad Business, which adds another layer to it. So it's just having all three elements together really helped us figure out a solution that actually makes sense. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, all the ventures that come out of Greenhouse, the number one thing that we do here is we connect them to other people who know more about the topic and can fit the solution in or work in these places where it can be implemented, right?
So one cool example was when we were working on the mattress, we were going to use pistons. And we were okay, it's cool. Everybody, when we're in Velocity, okay, it makes sense. we come here and they're like, and then like when you start talking to people, they're like, wait, so these pistons just like shoot up and like hit us? And I'm like, oh no, like that makes like total sense now. And so we're able to like change our designs and build something better.
All right, next up. So Alex, I know I had the honor of helping you out quite a bit this term, and it was honestly a privilege to watch you grow. And that's okay. One of the things you said initially early on was that to make long-lasting change, we need to teach children. Children are the source of future long-term behavior change. From your research and everything you've learned, would you say that children are more receptive to change than adults?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think there are many adults who are very sustainable and who are very passionate about the environment, but children are our future and they're much more adaptable, I guess. They're not hardened in their ways. They're not time poor like a lot of adults are. So they have the time and the resources to dedicate to asking questions. They're still young enough to be asking these questions of why. I mean, how many people have seen children or heard of children who just ask why and why and why, and they keep going. And I mean, we just get so annoyed that we usually just tell them to shut up. But, or nicer words, sorry, don't advocate that. But I have an 11-year-old sister, and I've grown up with her, and I know she asks a lot of questions, and they can get frustrating. And these days, I just tell her to Google it. And I think that's a really great thing, especially with our youth today, is that they have all these resources. We're in an information society, and if we ask these questions, the internet can tell us a lot of answers, and it could connect us to people who have a lot of answers. And so I think youth and children who have grown up in this environment and who are totally used to using technology, that's really great, and that's a definite advantage to children today.
Cool. I'm glad that I got a chance to ask you all a little bit about something specific about your ventures, but one of the things that I think you might all think is, how do people actually get started, and what is it that pushes you over the edge to actually get out of your chair and make your way up to the front of the stage and become one of the winners of this fund? And so I have a few questions about the journey and the process. And Alex, this term, you kind of came in and you had like this passion for the environment. Like, climate change is a pressing issue, as we were talking about deeply today in the greenhouse room. So when did you know you were onto something? What was the turning point where you realized this is it? This is the idea that I'm going to follow, and pour your heart into it?
Right, so I say the light bulb moment, and I don't really mean that it happened all at once. A light bulb moment is not like a magical click and all of a sudden all the pieces come together. But I dedicated almost all of January to going to meetings, to meeting new people, to understanding about climate change and where I could fit into this small piece of myself, into this large system. And it was finally mid-February that I went to a climate talk here actually in this building, COP21. And they were talking about how an everyday person could make a difference. Someone in the audience had asked a question to the panel. And one of the panelists says that anyone who wants to make a difference can do three things. They can reduce their energy, reduce their consumption, and then talk to other people. And that's really what became my light bulb moment, where it all started to fit together. That they also were talking about the recycling program, the Blue Box program that actually started in the KW area, which I had no idea about before, but I think is amazing. And then they went to the children first. They taught the children how to recycle at schools, and then the children brought that home to their parents and basically nagged their parents to start recycling, because recycling was a really new and innovative concept back in the late 70s and 80s. And so when it was really after coming away from that talk that I went back to my apartment and just furiously took out my laptop and started typing madly away about all these different ideas that are starting to come together, all about like, can I talk to people about this? Can I go to the youth then, if the youth are the ones making the change? Can I bring it together with reducing their consumption, because consumption is something that I'm really intrigued by, and so it was all just kind of like a storm that started to settle, and that's, yeah.
That's awesome. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Tina, and my question is, you know, you were mentioning that a year ago today you were just getting into the incubator space. You just won your scholarship into, and I remember it. I remember like it was yesterday. But you've grown and changed so much. So can you tell us where you were like a year and a half ago in terms of, and what you've learned over the course of doing this?
So I remember a year ago or a year and a half ago, I didn't have a lot of interest in social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. I remember it was right after I just, participated in a case competition, and I met some people who were passionate in entrepreneurship. That motivated me to compete in the Big Ideas Challenge. That went very well. And I think what really got me into the space and grew my interest in it was all the skills that I learned from the workshops and all the interesting speakers that Greenhouse brought in and told us of their journeys. And I thought, I'm here, I think I can do it. So I did it.
Good job.
So
yeah.
That's
awesome. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Zied. And this question's a bit intense, and I think most social entrepreneurs would have something, a little gut feeling of, ooh, I would hate this question. But I'm gonna ask you, Zied, because you're awesome. But the question's very serious. It's, what are your internal fears with respect to your venture? I think we all have them as social entrepreneurs, so I'm counting on you to go strong.
Fear is realizing that you might end up failing, because you never know really what's going to happen down the line. Maybe somebody already has a patent on my technology, and I have to give up on this whole thing, or maybe it's not something that people would want. So you never know. You're just living a lot of uncertainty, I think, and so you just have to it's you have to just look for the ups in it, I think, and just be happy with what you're doing. And then just remember, it's always a learning experience. So at the end of the day, even if it all doesn't go well, I learned a lot. I built a really nice network, and it was just an awesome experience. Better than just chilling at home and playing Xbox.
All right. So I'm gonna pass the follow-up question to Ashwin, which is, what would you do if your venture failed? What would you still walk away from, or how would you, what would it be like if you failed, I guess? Tell us a little bit about that, because people fear failing, right? It's a fear of failing before you get started. So what would failing look like at this point for you? Does that make sense?
To be honest, I don't know. I haven't thought about failing, I watch a lot of Nike ads and Michael Jordan commercials. So it keeps me optimistic. Try and try again. Children's 10 doesn't work out, but it's pretty established. But if it didn't work out, there's to me it's just not a possibility. But I think there's still like I said, there's so many different ways, at least with my problem, to invest in Sri Lanka. Right? There's even going back and being a role model and teaching at the homes that are there. If I'm not able to expand it here, and I graduate and it dies off here, I can still go back. Getting 2 degrees here, so I can put them to use over there and teach some kids some good stuff.
It's important to ask this question because 80% of startups fail in the first 3 years. So if we're not asking this question, if we're not addressing this fear of failure, then we'll never actually take root. And like you said, you've done a lot of amazing work already with Children 10. And so even if it doesn't go on after you graduate, the work you've done has been great. So anyways, that's the hope for all of us. But and then I'm going to pass it over to Laura for the last question, which is, it's so hard to do this and school. How does one go about doing these things all at once in a time-poor society, as we mentioned earlier?
It is really hard. I went through a period of adjustment because I came into Greenhouse in the fall, so I've done 2 school terms now with doing both of these things, and part of it was natural because one of the reasons why I was interested in social entrepreneurship and in Greenhouse was because I did a lot of this stuff, this kind of stuff, my own research in my free time already. So I had sort of that time set aside in my life. It's really hard. But what I found hard isn't doing the social venture part of it, because we're here because we love to do it. We're here for the learning experience, to be able to access the resources that Greenhouse has and put them into action. The tricky part is still wanting to do schoolwork when you're doing all of this other cool stuff.
Professors, plug your ears.
Because you're taking all the knowledge that you have, all the education that you have from your degree, and putting it into action to the real world. So it makes doing schoolwork not nearly as thrilling. But one of the greatest things about that whole dynamic is that living in greenhouse, everyone's in the same boat. We all understand the struggle of trying to do two major things at once. So living in a community where everyone is sort of struggling with the same things has been so instrumental, because we meet every Wednesday, and so that's midweek. Usually people have some sort of thing that they're dealing with midweek, and you get the encouragement from other people. You realize that you're not, this isn't an impossible task. Other people are doing it too, and you can lean on each other for that support. I think it would be so hard. I think honestly for me it would have been impossible to try to do all this not being in that kind of community, because you really need that support, because it is really difficult to balance everything.
Yeah, I think all the greenhousers would agree with you. You guys are like one big family, always cuddled up. We're supporting each other. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sorry we don't have more time for more questions from the audience. We have another panel coming up, and I just want to give it up for these wonderful entrepreneurs and innovators one more time.